Welcome to Value Plays Only, where Emrakul gives you an extra turn. It's Group Hug. Today we have John playing Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. This is a landfall combo deck. It can assemble many different infinite combos with any land untapping ability. It can often win only through activated abilities once it gets going. His hand contains a Carpet of Flowers, Lotus Cobra, Six, Ice Till Explorer, Quarter Calling, Mirror Pool, and Verdant Catacombs. Kami is playing Rograkh, Son of Rograkh, and Tevesh Szat, Doom of Fools. This deck is hell on earth. It looks to polymorph its commanders into horrible threats, denying resources and winning by causing all your friends to leave the room. Her hand contains a Vexing Bauble, Lotus Petal, Poetic Ritual, Transmogrify, Deflecting Swat, Prismatic Vista, and Blightstep Pathway. Dan is playing Zhulodok, Void Gorger. This is a big mana, colorless, random number generator. It looks to cast discounted high CMC cards to cascade into a win. It usually wins through a Glaring Fleshraker loop. His hand contains a Soul Ring, Glaring Fleshraker, the One Ring, Treasure Vault, and Urza's Tower. His Luna Mulligans are Gemstone Caverns and Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. Tyler is playing Rograkh, Son of Rograkh, and Thrasios, Triton Hero. This is a Gaia's Cradle Storm list. It looks to make tons of mana and dump it into Thrasios to pump out a win. His hand contains a Springleaf Drum, Ice Till Explorer, Mindbreak Trap, Shifting Woodlands, and Verdant Catacombs. His Luna Mulligans are Flesh Duplicate and Chain of Vapor. And with that, let's see some value plays. John starts things off with a Verdant Catacombs. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a snow-covered forest. He casts a Carpet of Flowers. John passes the turn. Kami plays a Blightstep Pathway as land for turn. She casts a Lotus Petal. She casts her commander, Rograkh, Son of Rograkh. She casts a Vexing Bauble. Tyler looks at the bauble, then looks at his commander, and decides that this can't stand. He casts Mindbreak Trap, exiling Vexing Bauble. Kami then passes the turn. Dan plays a Treasure Vault as land for turn. He casts a Soul Ring. Dan passes the turn. Tyler plays a Verdant Catacombs as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Tropical Island. He casts his commander, Rograkh, Son of Rograkh. Tyler casts Springleaf Drum. He then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. In his first main phase, he adds 1 mana through his Carpet. He casts a Tiller Engine. John plays Mirror Pool as land for turn, and to play tapped. Tiller Engine triggers to tap down Springleaf Drum. John then passes the turn. Kami untaps and draws. She plays a Prismatic Vista as land for turn. She pays life and cracks it, fetching up a mountain. She casts a Pyretic Ritual. It resolves, and Kami taps out to cast Transmogrify, targeting Rograkh. To her surprise, it resolves. Rograkh is exiled, and Kami puts it into the command zone. She then starts revealing cards from the top of her library until she reveals a Valgavoth, Terror Eater, putting it into play. John looks at his commander and cries softly. Happy with her turn too, Kami passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays an Urza's Tower as land for turn. He casts the One Ring. It resolves and Dan gains protection from everything. He taps the ring to draw a card. Dan passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays Shifting Woodland as land for turn. He casts his other commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. He then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. In his main phase, he adds a mana through his Carpet. He casts Lotus Cobra. John then plays a Gaia Reach Sanitarium as land for turn. Cobra triggers to make a green mana. John casts Green Sun Zenith with X equals 2. It resolves and he searches up a Collector Oof to the battlefield, hoping to buy time to deal with Valgavoth. John then passes the turn. Kami untaps and draws. She plays an Arid Mesa as land for turn. She pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Badlands. She casts a Damping Sphere. Kami goes to combat swinging Valgavoth at John. He takes the damage, and Kami passes the turn. Dan untaps and in his upkeep he takes 1 from the One Ring. He plays a Mycosynth the Gardens as land for turn. He casts Glaring Fleshraker. Dan shouldn't actually be able to tap Treasure Vault under Collector Roof, but the table don't notice this immediately. Dan then passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays an Urza Saga as land for turn, getting his first counter. He casts an Earthcraft. Tyler passes the turn. John untaps and draws. In his first main phase, he adds a green mana through Carpet. John casts Ice Till Explorer. He then goes to combat, swinging his creatures at Kami. She takes the damage, and John passes the turn. Kami untaps and draws. She plays a Luxury Suite as land for turn. She recasts her commander, Rograkh, Son of Rograkh. She then goes to combat and swings Valgavoth at John. He takes the damage, and she passes yet again. Dan untaps, and in his upkeep, he takes 1 from the One Ring. He plays Fomori Vault as land for turn. He casts a Moonsilver Key. Fleshraker triggers to make a spawn. It triggers again to ping each opponent for 1. Dan then passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. Urza Saga triggers to get its second counter. He plays a Polluted Delta as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it into the Valgavoth zone to fetch up an island. He then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. Looking at his dwindling options, John has 2 green mana through his Carpet. He casts Invasion of Ikoria, where X equals 1. It resolves and John gives the invasion to Tyler to defend. He searches up a Birds of Paradise to the battlefield as an emergency Valgavoth blocker. John then plays Verdant Catacombs from his grave through Ice Till. Cobra and Ice Till trigger. John mills 1 into the Valgavoth zone and then adds green mana. He pays life and cracks Verdant Catacombs, fetching up a snow-covered forest. Cobra and Ice Till trigger. John mills 1 and then adds green mana. He casts Court of Calling, convoking some of his creatures with X equals 5. He searches up an Ashaya, Soul of the Wilds, onto the battlefield. He then casts a Mana Vault. John shouldn't be able to do this under Damping Sphere this turn, but no one noticed it, and Collector Roof means it won't be used. John then passes the turn. Cammy untaps and draws. She plays Polluted Delta from exile as land for turn. She pays a life and cracks it, fetching up a swamp. She casts her other commander, Tevesh Szat, Doom of Fools. She activates the +2 loyalty ability of Tevesh, making 2 thralls. Cammy then goes to combat, swinging Valgavoth at John. He takes the damage, and Cammy passes the turn. Dan untaps and in his upkeep, the One Ring deals 1 to him. He looks around at his artifact-based board and has not much to do. He decides to activate Fomori Vault, discarding a land and then looking at the top 4 cards of his library, adding 1 to hand. He plays Ancient Tomb as land for turn. Dan then passes the turn. In his end step, Tyler uses Urza's Saga to create a construct. He then taps his 3 creatures to Earthcraft 1 by 1 to untap his land 3 times, spending the mana to activate Thrasios. He scries 1 and reveals a Croaking Counterpart, adding it to his hand. The turn then moves to Tyler. Tyler untaps and draws. In his main phase, Urza's Saga triggers to get its 3rd counter. In response, Tyler activates it to create another construct. He then searches up an expedition map to the battlefield, maybe for later. He casts Croaking Counterpart, targeting Valgavoth to make a token copy, looking to get in on Cammy's fun. Cammy says no fun for him and casts Deflecting Swat, targeting Counterpart. Swat resolves and changes Counterpart's target to Collector Oof. Tyler makes a 1/1 Frog Oof. He then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He goes to combat, swinging a Shia at the invasion. Tyler blocks with the Oof. In his second main phase, Carpet triggers to add 2 green mana. He plays Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, as land for turn. Lotus Cobra and Ice Tail trigger. John mills a card and adds a green mana. He casts 6. It enters as a land due to a Shia and Lotus Cobra and Ice Tail trigger to make another green and mill. With no other plays to make under Valgavoth, John passes the turn. Cammy untaps and draws. She plays a Snow-Covered Forest as land for turn. She casts a Root Path Purifier for 4 life through Valgavoth. Cammy then casts Eldritch Evolution, sacrificing Purifier as an additional cost. The table know this will put out a Sire of Insanity and need to act here. Dan passes priority and so does Tyler. John, in an act of desperation, activates Gaia Reach Sanitarium to force each player to draw and discard, hoping Cammy may just draw her target and fizzle this turn. Everyone draws and discards. Then Cammy goes searching and puts Sire of Insanity onto the battlefield. Hope for the table hits an all-time low. Cammy uses the +2 ability of Tevesh Szat to make 2 more thralls. She then casts a 3-mana Vampiric Tutor. It resolves and Cammy searches a card at the top of her library, losing 2 life. She then passes the turn. In her instep, Sire triggers to discard all hands into the Valgavoth zone. Dan untaps and in his upkeep, he takes 1 from the One Ring. He casts a Mere Enforcer. Fleshraker triggers to make a spawn, and then triggers again to ping everyone for 1. Enforcer then enters and Fleshraker triggers to ping everyone for 1. Dan passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He activates Thrasios, hoping for an answer. He reveals an Enduring Vitality, adding it to hand. Tyler casts Enduring Vitality. He then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He casts a Vexing Bauble, hoping this keeps Cammy off of her Valgavoth cards. He then passes the turn. Cammy untaps and draws. She casts Nether Void. It resolves and Cammy activates the +2 ability of Tevesh Szat, making 2 more thralls. John and Dan say that's plenty for them to scoop it up, but Tyler says he has hope. Cammy plays Sanctum of Eternity from exile and then passes the turn. Dan untaps and in his upkeep, the One Ring triggers to deal 1 to him. He activates Fomori Vault, discarding Scorched Ruins to add a card to hand. He plays Ugin's Labyrinth as land for turn. He then passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He activates Thrasios, revealing a Hedge Maze, putting it into play tapped, triggering to Surveil, leaving it on top. He passes the turn, and in his end step, Sire triggers to discard all hands yet again. John untaps and draws. He plays Shifting Woodland as land for turn. Ice Tail and Lotus Cobra trigger to make a mana and then mill a card. Resigned to his fate, John passes the turn. Cammy untaps and draws. She activates the -10 ability of Tevesh Szat, killing it. This is the final nail in the coffin. Now that everyone has no hand, no graveyard, no ability to cast spells, and now no commanders, the table scoop it up. And with that, Cammy wins the game. Today, we have a 2-for-1 deal. In this game, Cammy is playing Tasigur, the Golden Fang. This evolution list looks to ladder Tasigur into massive threats. It plays several infinite mana combos with Tasigur and Thassa's Oracle. Her hand contains a Chrome Mox, Talisman of Dominance, Banishing Knack, the One Ring, Bloodstained Mire, and Watery Grave. Her Luna Mulligan is a Wooded Foothills. Dan is again playing Zhulodok, Void Gorger. His hand contains a Voltaic Key, Honor Worn Shaku, Urza's Saga, Fomori Vault, and Scorched Ruins. His Luna Mulligans are All Is Dust and Unwinding Clock. Tyler is playing Sisay, Weatherlight Captain. This 5-color tutor chain has 0-card win lines it can tutor to the battlefield if it makes enough mana. In addition, it plays all the best value pieces 5 colors can offer. His hand contains Flash Thompson Spider Fan, Abrupt Decay, Rhystic Study, Soul Ring, Polluted Delta, Tundra, and Plateau. John is again playing Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. His hand contains Lotus Petal, Soul Ring, Spelunking, Scape Shift, Invasion of Ikoria, Urza's Cave, and Verdant Catacombs. And with that, let's see some value plays. Cammy starts things off with a Watery Grave, into play on tap, paying 2 life. She casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Banishing Knack as it enters. She then casts a Talisman of Dominance. With a pretty good start, Cammy passes the turn. Dan plays a Fomori Vault as land for turn. He casts a Soul Ring. Dan passes the turn. Tyler plays a Polluted Delta as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Bayou. He casts a Soul Ring of his own. Tyler then passes the turn. John plays an Urza's Cave as land for turn. He casts a Soul Ring. He casts Lotus Petal. John taps out to cast Spelunking. It resolves and triggers to draw and put Verdant Catacombs onto the battlefield. John then casts Zurin Orb. He passes the turn. Cammy untaps and draws. She plays a Bloodstained Mire as land for turn. She pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Bayou. She casts the One Ring. It enters and she gains protection from everything. Cammy taps it to draw a card. She then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays an Urza Saga as land for turn, getting its first counter. He passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays a Tundra as land for turn. He casts a Badgermole Cub. It enters and triggers to Earthbend his Tundra. Tyler taps out to cast a Rhystic Study. He then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He pays life and cracks his Verdant Catacombs, fetching up a snow-covered forest. He casts Malevolent Catastrophe. Rhystic triggers and Tyler draws. John reveals the top 4, adding Lazotep Quarry to hand, milling the rest and making a Scion. He plays Lazotep Quarry as land for turn. John pays 3 into Urza's Cave, sacrificing it to search up a Havenwood's Battleground into play. John then passes the turn. Cammy untaps and in her upkeep, she takes 1 from the One Ring. Cammy activates the One Ring to draw 2 cards. She plays Otawara, Soaring City as land for turn. She delves a card from her grave to help cast her commander, Tasigur, the Golden Fang. Rhystic triggers and Tyler draws. Cammy then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. Urza Saga gets another counter. He plays Scorched Ruins as land for turn, sacrificing Urza Saga and Fomori Vault. Dan casts Honor-Worn Shaku. Rhystic triggers and he pays. Dan then passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays a Marsh Fox as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Savannah. He casts his commander, Sisay, Weatherlight Captain. Tyler passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He plays a Castle Garenbrig as land for turn. John sacrifices Havenwood Battleground for 2 green to help activate Castle Garenbrig, making 6 creature mana. He casts his commander, Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. Rhystic triggers and he pays. In response, Tyler casts Flash Thompson, Spider Fan. It enters and triggers to untap his Tundra. He then casts Abrupt Decay, targeting Spelunking. Spelunking is destroyed, and then Lumra enters and triggers, milling 4 and returning a boatload of lands to the battlefield tapped. To stop this turn, John has to pass the turn. Cammy untaps and in her upkeep, she takes 2 from the One Ring. She taps the ring to draw 3 cards. Cammy plays Flooded Strand as land for turn. She pays life and cracks it, fetching up a tropical island. Cammy casts a Seedborn Muse. The table will shift their focus to Cammy as Rhystic triggers and she pays. Cammy then passes the turn. Dan and Cammy untap together. He plays the City of Traders as land for turn. Dan looks longingly at his commander, and then the One Ring Seedborn combo decides he needs to be the police right now. Dan casts Desecrate Reality, targeting the One Ring, the Zurin Orb, and Badgermole Cub. Rhystic triggers and Tyler draws. In response, Cammy taps the One Ring to draw 4 cards. Desecrate Reality then resolves, exiling a lot of problems. Dan then passes the turn. In his end step, Cammy activates Tasigur, milling Hoarding Broodlord and Carpet of Flowers. Tyler gives her Carpet of Flowers. The turn then moves to Tyler. Tyler and Cammy untap together. He plays Plateau as land for turn. He casts Delighted Halfling. He casts Spider-Woman, Stunning Savior. He passes the turn. In his end step, Cammy activates Tasigur, milling Arcane Signet and Reality Shift. John gives her Arcane Signet. The turn then moves to John. John and Cammy untap together. John activates Urza's Cave, sacrificing it. In response, Cammy flashes in an Opposition Agent. Rhystic triggers and she pays. John cannot believe how bad his game has gotten. In response, John pays life and cracks his Verdant Catacombs, fetching up a snow-covered forest. Urza's Cave then resolves, and Cammy searches up a Gaia's Cradle into exile. John then externalizes Timeless Witness from his grave, creating a token copy of it, which triggers to add Spelunking from grave back to hand. He casts Spelunking. Rhystic triggers and Tyler draws. Spelunking enters and triggers to draw a card and put Cavernous Souls into play, naming Elemental as it enters. John goes to combat, swinging Lumra at Cammy. She takes 8, and John passes the turn. Cammy untaps and draws. She plays a Gaia's Cradle as land for turn. She casts Kinnan, Bond of Prodigy. Rhystic triggers and Tyler draws. She casts an Arcane Signet. Rhystic triggers and Tyler draws. Signet enters tapped, and Cammy casts Hullbreaker Horror. Rhystic triggers and Tyler draws. Hullbreaker enters tapped. Cammy then taps out to cast Imperial Seal. Hullbreaker and Rhystic trigger. Tyler draws, and then Hullbreaker bounces Rhystic back to his hand. She searches up a card at the top of her library and loses 2 life. Cammy then passes the turn. Dan and Cammy untap together. In Dan's upkeep, Cammy activates Kinnan, looking at the top 5 and putting Toxrill the Corrosive into play. Dan finally gets to his main phase, surveying the crazy state of Cammy's board. Dan puts on his colorless police cap yet again and casts the Mightstone and the Weakstone. Cammy opts not to respond and it resolves. Mightstone and Weakstone triggers to give Seedborn -5/-5, killing it. Dan then passes the turn. In his end step, Toxrill triggers to give each creature a slime counter. The turn then moves to Tyler. Tyler untaps alone and draws. He plays an Underground Sea as land for turn. He casts a Mox Opal. He recasts Rhystic Study. He casts Into the Floodmaw, targeting Toxrill, hoping to save the shreds of his board. Toxrill bounces to hand, and Tyler passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He goes into the tank thinking how to navigate this board, knowing Cammy has a Tasigur activation and Hullbreaker. He starts by activating Mount of Ronem, dealing 4 to Opposition Agent. In response, Cammy activates Tasigur, milling Tandem Pact and Hazel's Brewmaster. Tyler gives her Reality Shift to hand. Cammy casts Reality Shift, targeting Lumra, Hullbreaker, and Rhystic Trigger. Tyler draws and Hullbreaker bounces Opposition Agent back to Cammy's hand, hoping to save it for the next turn cycle if it comes. Lumra is exiled and John manifests the top card of his library. Mount of Ronem then fizzles. John casts Scapeshift. Rhystic triggers and he pays. Amazingly, Scapeshift resolves. John never thought he'd get this far. He sacrifices all 7 of his lands, putting Lotus Field, Command Beacon, Vesuva, Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, Echoing Deeps, Field of the Dead, and Shifting Woodland into play. Echoing Deeps enters as a Cavern of Souls, naming Elemental. Lotus Field and 7 Field of the Dead triggers go on the stack. John makes 7 zombies and then floats some mana and sacrifices 2 of his lands. He activates Command Beacon, adding Lumra to his hand. He casts Lumra, paying for Rhystic. It enters and triggers to mill 4 cards, returning a boatload of lands to the battlefield. A crazy number of Field of the Dead triggers go on the stack here, making boatloads more zombies. John then casts Altar of Dementia. From here, John can sacrifice his zombies to mill out most of his library. He can then sacrifice Lumra, using Command Beacon to return it to hand to avoid command attacks. John can cast Lumra a few more times to return all lands in his library to the battlefield. He uses some of his mana to cast Ashaya, Soul of the Wilds. As John goes through this loop, he'll eventually have Vesuva enter as a copy of Lumra. It will trigger and then die to the Legend Rule. In response to the Lumra trigger, John will activate Strip Mine, sacrificing itself to destroy Sunscorched Desert. The Lumra ability will then return Vesuva, Sunscorch, and Strip Mine to the battlefield. Each time John goes through this loop, Sunscorched Desert enters and triggers to ping an opponent for 1. John can use this loop to ping down his opponents 1 by 1 until they're all dead. And with that, John wins the game. So what did we learn today? Turns out polymorphing into one of your 2 horrible threats can be enough to strangle out a game. Also, if you have 10 lands with niche abilities, one is bound to help get you out of a bind. If you have any tips for the video, leave them below. Subscribe if you feel like it. Until next time, keep making value plays. I'm gonna try and race Cammy. At punches.
Okay.
Cammy kill him.
And then, well, yeah, when she kills me,
kill
dude, why are you rooting
you're
for
gonna be dealing
Malgavon?
9 flying lifelink.
Yeah.
I get it.
And he's gonna be racing. So you're gonna have to do 18?
Kill him.
Shut the fuck up.
What's the race here?
Shut the.
Damping sphere.
Raise that, biatch.
I mean, the 3 of us punching her is the only hope. If we could offset
you.
9.
Yeah, what the hell? I gotta get rid of that freaking.
Yeah, you're never getting rid of it.
Ooh, Dan's getting close.
Striker.
Dan's getting close.
To what?
To what?
To winning. Are we scooping?
Yeah, I mean, I can.
Yeah, I'm fucking done.
Yeah.
Alright. Great.
And then I'm playing it out. They all go to me.
Yeah, you're playing it out. Okay. And then Cammy plays alone for 20
Give me
more
my
minutes.
cards.
Give me all my cards.
Here. I don't want that.
That is good to happen. I am good to let the Lumra ability resolve. I'm going to mill 4. They are tapped. This isn't a combo.
I'm just saying, next turn you got 10 billion mana.
And they again, I can't do anything with it. They enter tapped. I need to get the other piece.
Alright, I'm gonna pay 7. I'm not casting my commander to do this. I'm gonna cast Desecrate Reality. For each opponent, exile up to 1 target permanent that player controls with an even mana value. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yo, you had Ghost Quarter and you didn't consider blowing up Dan's fucking...
This is the first turn it's untapped.
Oh.
I literally just untapped.
So are you
and I got
considering
it? No. No, Dan fucking wins. Fuck both of you. She just has Hullbreaker Horror, and we're in a scenario where, like, everyone is just, like, she's gonna activate Tasigur, and everyone's gonna give her, like, an instant cast to do something to bounce any spell that I play.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're all in a scenario where
Same.
none of us are really gonna be able to win if we're all just, like, trying to fight each other.
We've been in the same scenario before. If Tasigur
It's the Seaborn 400 mana problem.
Yeah.
Of, like, yeah, it becomes impossible to stop it.
The problem is if I kill Seedborn, then are we just throwing the game to John? Because I don't want to do that, obviously.
No, she has a hand of 40 and he has a hand of 11. Make him use it. If you can out the Seedborn, I think you absolutely need to do it.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna cast...
How could it be that he's the most interactive?
I know, like, what is going on
How could
here?
it be?
It's insane.
Well, it's Cammy, but she's in the lead. So.
Right.
Yeah.
How can it be that he's the nicest, most interactive deck?
I'll tell you, I drew like probably 10 lands.
Captain 20 mana. Now finally passed 2.
Dude, I got nothing.
Really? You pass on this? I have this Ultra Dementia, so I can just start sacking these to both mill myself. Huh? to mill all you guys out, and then I'll show you as I mill through my deck with Lumra.
I was
With
just
strip
thinking,
mine,
I'm
I can
like,
use
I'm
it.
gonna
I was
Sack
thinking you had like
this.
some like hard counters with all the cards in your hand. I guess I didn't realize you were like relying so hard on Tasigur.